So welcome to this very first episode of Cooking with TRMN. I'm going to be back in 1 second. Grabbing a knife. So today I am going to prepare for you my meat sauce and of course the pasta that goes with it. It's a dish that's really easy to make. It's very simple. Depending on how you want to make it, there are many different ways you can do this. So there's a little bit of creativity involved, but I generally use a relatively set, generally a set recipe. So I've got all of my cooking utensils prepared. Over here I've got my spices are all lined up. A mixing bowl, colander for the pasta, lid for the pot. Put over here for now. And over here I've got, the oven is all set up and ready to go. And I've got lined up behind the oven here all of the various utensils that I'm going to be using throughout this demonstration. So there may be some cuts in the video, and I apologize if it sort of jumps weirdly, but Admiralty House is sadly understaffed, so I'm doing this alone. But the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure you have all of your ingredients ready. So of course, I'm going to be using ground bison meat. I happen to like ground bison meat. It works really well with the spices that I've chosen. It sort of brings out the flavor more, if that makes any sense. For every pound of meat, you want 1 egg. Usually an A or a double A large egg is usually what I use. You want to make sure that your spices are in order. There's going to be some salt, some pepper, a little bit of garlic powder, some chili powder I usually add in, a little bit of ground cumin, ground cayenne pepper, and some paprika. And of course, all of that's going to go into the mixing bowl. You're eventually going to need some water. So you can either use bottled water or I use a Brita filter. Whichever one you want to do works. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, whichever is easiest for you to work with. So let us start by dropping stuff on the floor. Ham. Gonna ham up the pan a little bit. And of course we do that so that, stuff doesn't stick, and then I'm going to fill the pot with water. For this, I just use standard tap water. Here in Massachusetts, it's generally filtered, so it's generally decent water. Now, of course, you want to work on the water while you're working on everything else. So a little trick to make your water boil a little bit slower is to add some salt. So just a splash of salt in the water will give it some time to come up to a boil so that you don't need to do it like instantly. You don't have to throw the pasta in while you're trying to, fiddle with the meat and all that stuff. You're going to be doing both at the same time. So it's not an issue of one or the other. You're going to be doing both at the same time, but it's an issue of how controlled do you want it to be. I prefer lots of control. I'm going to turn the fan on here to kind of a low fan initially, and then step it up just a little bit. So you'll probably get some fan background noise too, and I do apologize for that, but I'm trying to ensure that the microphone is on me and not on the fan, so that will probably help quite a bit. So now I gotta obviously get the meat out of here. The only downside with these packets is that they're just a pain to open. So usually, this is what the knife is for. Just a sharp cutting knife. I'll do that right here so you can see it. find it pretty effective if you can give up two sides of this cut, then sometimes it doesn't work the way you want. Which is why we have scissors. Oh. Scissors. Perfect. Now we got the meat. We're going to just dump that in here. Oh, I'm sure when I see it go dump. There we go. Going to get all of it out. And I've got a pot over here that I'm using as trash for the moment. Off my hands. Start the frying pan over here. And I'm going to start the water boiling as well. So I'm going to put the lid on the water. The lid's going to be on slightly, like not all the way on, but slightly on, just so that, you know, there's some air that gets in. It generally brings it to a boil a little bit faster. All right, now, I use a fork to mix this stuff because it's just easier than, you know, finding other utensils. And it tends to break up the meat pretty quickly. You can see here. Next step is to add the egg. Still involved in egg cracking. And you want to make certain that the entire egg is sort of mixed in with the meat. So you want to make sure that you sort of have this going on in there. And it's just going to give it a little bit of viscosity in the entire thing. It adds a little bit, and it helps hold the meat together in a sense that it stays firm, but it's not a big compact clump of meat. Because while we would all love to eat big giant clumps of meat, we shouldn't. A little bit of salt. And this really is a process of doing this to taste. I've done it so many times that I don't know the measurements I'm using fully, but I do know that, you know, a little bit of pepper, just a sprinkle of garlic powder, a sprinkle of chili powder, a sprinkle of cumin. Here is the red pepper, the cayenne pepper, and the chili pepper. And it looks like this. Now we're going to mix all this in, and then it's going to go onto the stove that's happily heating up saucepan over here. So this is going to become a meat sauce, and I realize that seems kind of hard when there's really not much saucy material in here. So obviously there's going to be some things that turn this into a sauce. This is my mother's recipe, so I tend to use, but my mother's and my grandmother's, so I tend to use some ingredients that we might otherwise not associate directly with pasta sauce, including actually there's a little bit of ketchup that's going to go in here, and there is mustard. So nice sort of well mixed, and once you have it well mixed, you're going to come over here to your saucepan, because now it's going to go into the saucepan, and it's going to go in as one big clump. There we go. Just listen to that. Fork is always good to sort of save around for later. Make sure you wash it off. Make sure you dry it off. You're actually going to use the fork to sort of whisk up the pasta a little bit. So that make sure it's nice and clean. And a little dumpster over there. Standard spatula. Nothing really interesting with the spatula. It's a standard spatula. Just make sure that you move the meat around. You want to ensure that the meat is browning, but also that it's separating and becoming smaller chunks of meat. And as it browns, it will be easier to separate. So make sure you're browning on all sides. There you go. See that? Now, you don't want too much heat either, so everybody's oven is different. I'm not going to give you a temperature setting. You all know what setting your meat browns on your particular stove, so I'm going to let you figure that one out yourself. Start using the spatula to hack up the larger clumps. The larger chunks obviously are big, and you just want to make them smaller because it's all going to be interspersed with a plate of pasta later on. And just keep it going until it browns nicely. Keep an eye on your pasta water. Make sure that your pasta water is doing what it's supposed to do as well. But the main objective here is obviously to get the meat browned so that you can start adding stuff to it. Now, while your meat is browning, one of the things that you should do is you should sort of prep everything else that you're going to need. So you are going to need mustard. In this case, I'm using a Swedish mustard. You could use a more Dijon-like mustard as well. A Dijon mustard would actually go very well with this. You want it to be a little bit spicier than a yellow mustard. A yellow mustard is just too bland for this. So we got the mustard. Good old friend Heinz tomato ketchup. And because we have about a pound of meat, we are going to do 1 cup of water. It doesn't hurt if you're a little bit over the cup mark. That'll actually be pretty decent. Again, just make sure that you keep an eye on the meat. It should be browning nicely. You don't want it burned, but you also don't want it red. Undercooked meat is never a good idea unless you're doing it like a steak and you're like, like a medium kind of steak thing. But undercooked ground beef is just never a good idea. So make sure you're browning your meat. Make sure it gets browned as evenly as possible. There you go. One thing to always remember when you're cooking, especially if you're standing in a hot kitchen, and tonight, this kitchen is really hot because I have all the lights on, is make sure you hydrate yourself. It's just very important that you drink stuff. Make sure that you're hydrating yourself as you're cooking. Always hydrate yourself in general. No, this is not alcoholic. I'm doing the Pepsi thing tonight. There you go, Pepsi. Free product placement. All right, so back to here. We're going to make sure that this is browning nicely, which it looks like it is. I've got a nice sort of series of smaller pieces in here. You can already smell the spices. Sadly, I don't have smell-o-vision, but if I did, you'd be able to smell the spices coming out of here. It's a little bit light on pepper, which I knew it would be. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some pepper in later on. Be right back. So we're going to add some pepper in later on. Like I said, it's browning nicely. Make sure that all the bigger bits are chopped into smaller bits. That's important. There we go, see? Alrighty. Now your water is starting to come to a boil, so make sure you have your pasta ready. That's equally important for this process. You are making meat sauce for a reason. I'm assuming it's a pasta-related event. Doesn't have to be, but I'm assuming it is. This also makes a really good taco filling, by the way. All right. So it looks like we are nice and sort of mini bits here, which is good. So we're going to add the water. This is always fun. Oh, before I add the water, I see that my pasta water is now fully at a boil. So let's get the pasta in there cooking. And again, this is really to taste. It's however much pasta you want. If you're not a huge pasta fan, don't use a lot of pasta. If you're a huge pasta fan, use a lot of pasta. It really is to taste. But I'm going to make enough for leftovers because I happen to like leftovers. All right, so now the pasta is added to the bowl. We're going to add some water over here. I'm using the fork. I'm using the fork to get the pasta inside the pot. Okay. So now the pasta is churning away, and we've added the water to the meat sauce. We want to make sure that it's evenly spread out, so it's not like all puddled on one side of the pan. So just make sure you spread it out a little bit. And the next step after that is to add the mustard. So again, like I said, I'm using a Swedish mustard. You can use a Dijon mustard, but as you can tell, it's darker than regular yellow mustard. It's got a little bit of spice and a little bit of kick to it. How much you add is up to you. I am adding 2 spoonfuls, which actually empties this particular jar. Get some of the stuff off the edges to fully empty it. Here we go. All right. Put that fork right there. Oh yeah, spoon right there, sorry. This is done. And then make sure you stir this around. You want to get the mustard sort of, you want to get the mustard evenly spread throughout the entire dish. It's very important that you sort of spread it all out evenly. And if you feel you need more liquid, you can always add more water. You can also always turn the temperature down a little bit to ensure that the liquid stays, doesn't evaporate as quickly. Whichever one works for you, that's perfectly fine. Either one is a good option. So now we've got our mustard in there. Now we're going to add the ketchup. Again, this is to taste. The sauce should come out looking like a red, sort of dark brownish kind of sauce. So the amount of ketchup is really going to be up to how you want your sauce to be flavored. And there is no correct answer to that question. But you want to keep stirring it to ensure that it gets evenly spread out throughout the entire mixture. Make sure to keep an eye on your pasta during all of this. You certainly don't want your pasta boiling over. That's why I took the lid off. Now, I can already tell you that there's a little bit too little pepper in, so I'm going to add a little bit more of the coarse grind pepper. Not a lot, just sort of enough to taste. I'm going to ensure that that gets spread out throughout the dish. Now, as you can see, the sauce is turning a very nice sort of reddish brown color. It's a very, very quick process. You want to let this simmer for a little while. So once you think you're done with it, you're going to let it simmer for maybe about 5 to 8 minutes, depending on the stove that you're using, the setting that you have it on, and how long you have to basically prepare dinner. A few things to remember: always make certain that you have enough time to do the dish you're planning on doing. That's key. But secondly, make sure you have all the ingredients present. Hate to have to, go shopping in the middle of your cooking. That always sucks. I prepped all of this stuff in advance, so it was all here when I needed it. And then, of course, the other thing to remember is at the end of the day, a very, very important part of cooking is presentation. And so, with that in mind, bowl is all set. I'm going to put that right here for now. Put this over here for now. And let's check up on our pasta. Oh, yeah. The pasta feels good. As you can tell, this is simmering nicely. So now it's time to move the pasta off here. And always remember, when you remove a pot or a pan from the oven, turn the oven off. And to ensure that we don't damage the pot, because I'm going to put it back on the oven for storage, I'm putting a little bit of water in it so that it has a little bit of water in there to basically keep it safe. Now, for those of you that are wondering why this butter is here, now that I have the pasta in the colander, a little bit of butter, a little pat of butter is going to be added to this. That's going to help the pasta, that's going to help prevent the pasta from sticking together. It's going to make it that much easier, so to speak, to basically do what it is we want to do with the pasta. So add that there, and I'll let that start to melt a little bit while I put this into the fridge, so excuse me for 1 second. All right, while that's melting into the pasta a little bit, I'm going to take the spoon that we had from earlier, remember the spoon? And I'm going to taste the meat sauce. Actually, I'm going to wipe the spoon a little bit more first. There was a little splash of mustard in the corner that I had missed, so I'm going to make sure that that's gone, because otherwise it'll just taste of mustard. But we're going to take the spoon and we're going to taste the meat sauce. Now, do remember, this is coming from a hot stove, so you want to make certain that you cool it down. Gentle breaths, just blow on it very gently. And then when you think that it's cool enough for you to eat, oh, it's perfect. Perfect. Like I said, I have made this dish so many times. I know exactly how many shakes of each bottle it takes to make me happy. Everyone's going to be different, and you're going to have to experiment with it a little bit. Now I'm going to move some of the butter into the pasta here. The goal here is to make sure that the butter is all gone. And then I'm done with the fork. That's going well. And the one final ingredient that I like for my pasta, and not everybody does, is Parmesan cheese. Now, of course, they do say that a lot of food preparation is in the presentation, so this is absolutely no different. For those of you that don't have one, this is a great tool. It's a pasta ladle designed for pasta. You will see how it just picks up the pasta in its little tines, hooks it up nicely. There we go. And now, of course, the final part of this is the adding of the meat sauce. And there you have it, a dish, a pasta dish fit for anyone. So that's pretty much it. This is the first episode of Cooking with the RMN. Thank you for watching. I'm going to go enjoy my dinner. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. The recipe for this will be posted down below. I will post what I used, and I will post also alternatives to what I used for those times where the ingredients I'm using may not be readily available. Like the mustard is a good example. Or the bison, the ground bison is another good example. But check down below. We'll have another episode at some point. Not sure what it will be on, but we have many members. So thank you for watching, and have a great evening.